The diplomatic chamber aboard the neutral station Harmony's Edge had never hosted such an unusual gathering. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the crystalline conference table, their various forms of breathing apparatus creating a symphony of hisses, clicks, and mechanical whirs. At the far end, almost lost among the towering Zephyrians and the broad-shouldered Krillians, sat a small human girl. Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony Council adjusted his translator unit, its blue light flickering as it processed the various languages being spoken simultaneously. The emergency session had been called after reports of massive industrial accidents across 3 sectors, accidents that defied all known physics and engineering principles. Entire mining operations had simply vanished overnight, leaving behind perfectly spherical voids and asteroids. Shipyards had been found twisted into impossible geometric shapes, their metal structures folded like origami despite being made of military-grade duralloy. The human delegation consisted of only 2 individuals: Ambassador Chen, a weathered diplomat whose calm demeanor had earned respect throughout the galaxy, and the girl beside him. She appeared to be no more than 16 standard years old, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and wearing what looked like a standard-issue maintenance jumpsuit. Her name tag read simply, Maya. The incidents began 3 weeks ago, announced Coordinator Thrix, the session's moderator. His forearms gestured at the holographic displays showing the affected regions. Each event shares identical characteristics: complete structural failure followed by dimensional anomalies. Our best scientists are baffled. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The crystalline collective's representative chimed like wind through glass formations. Our analysis suggests these are not accidents. The precision indicates deliberate action. Ambassador Chen leaned forward slightly. If I may, Coordinator Thrix. These incidents occurred at facilities owned by corporations with documented histories of exploiting populations from what you term Deathworlds. The timing is not coincidental. A harsh clicking sound emerged from the insectoid delegate. Preposterous. The Deathworld species lack the technology for such operations. Their primitive chemical rockets barely achieve interplanetary travel. The girl named Maya remained perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic displays. She had not spoken once since entering the chamber, though several delegates had noticed her presence with barely concealed disdain. Humans were still considered a backwater species by most galactic standards, useful only for dangerous mining operations and hazardous waste disposal on worlds too hostile for civilized species. The damage patterns are inconsistent with any known weapon systems, continued the crystalline representative. Energy readings show massive gravitational fluctuations occurring simultaneously across vast distances. This suggests technology far beyond current galactic civilization levels. Veltar's translator crackled as he spoke. Perhaps we should focus on potential suspects rather than impossible theories. The Void Hunters have been quiet recently. This could be their work. The Void Hunters use energy weapons, Ambassador Chen replied calmly. These incidents show signs of spatial manipulation. Different signature entirely. As the debate continued, Maya's hands rested motionless on the table before her. To most observers, she appeared to be a child brought along for educational purposes, perhaps learning about galactic diplomacy. Only Ambassador Chen occasionally glanced her way, as if checking for some subtle signal. The Hegemony's military advisor, General Corax, stood to his full imposing height. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, making them natural soldiers and enforcers. I propose we increase security patrols in the affected sectors. If there is an unknown hostile force operating, we must respond with strength. More military presence will only escalate tensions, Ambassador Chen said quietly. These facilities were strip mining operations on inhabited worlds. The local populations had lodged formal complaints for years. Complaints that were properly processed through official channels, snapped the corporate representative from Meridian Industries. All operations followed established protocols for primitive world resource extraction. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her breathing remained steady, but something in her posture shifted. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop by a degree. The affected populations were properly compensated, continued the Meridian representative. Standard relocation packages, job placement in off-world facilities. These people should be grateful for the opportunity to join galactic civilization. Ambassador Chen's voice carried a warning edge. I think we should be very careful about our choice of words here. Why? General Corax demanded. Because we might offend your pet primitive? Humans are useful for dangerous work, Chen, but they have no place in policy discussions. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Maya had not moved, had not spoken, but every eye in the room had turned toward her. Her silence stretched on, becoming heavy and oppressive. The holographic displays flickered slightly as if experiencing electromagnetic interference. Coordinator Thrix cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to... No. Maya's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. She had not looked up from the table, had not moved except to speak that single word. Let him finish. General Corax straightened, mistaking her calm tone for submission. As I was saying, these Deathworlder species need to understand their place in the Galactic Order. They serve a purpose, but governance is not that purpose. Maya nodded slowly, still looking down at her hands. And what place is that exactly? Mining, waste disposal, hazardous environment work, Corax replied dismissively. Tasks too dangerous for civilized species. It is an arrangement that benefits everyone. The silence that followed stretched on. 10 seconds passed. 11. 12. On the 13th second, Maya looked up. Her eyes had changed. What had been simple brown now held depths that seemed to stretch beyond the confines of the chamber, beyond the station itself. The holographic displays around the room began to flicker more violently, and several delegates' breathing apparatus started emitting warning chimes. I see, Maya said softly. Thank you for clarifying. The change in the chamber was immediate and unsettling. Every piece of electronic equipment began displaying anomalous readings. The environmental controls stuttered, causing brief fluctuations in artificial gravity that made several delegates grip their chairs. The crystalline walls of the station, normally perfectly transparent, developed hairline fractures that spread in geometric patterns before mysteriously healing themselves. Ambassador Chen remained calm, though his knuckles whitened slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. He had seen Maya demonstrate her abilities before, but never in such a politically charged environment. The girl beside him appeared unchanged except for her eyes, which now seemed to contain swirling galaxies in miniature. What is happening here? Demanded Coordinator Thrix, his voice rising an octave as his translator struggled with the electromagnetic interference. Are we under attack? Maya tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. Attack? No, Coordinator. This is just me thinking. Her voice remained soft, conversational, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. You see, I have been very patient. We all have been patient. For decades, we have filed complaints through proper channels. We have requested investigations into labor practices. We have asked for basic safety standards and fair compensation. General Corax attempted to stand but found himself pressed back into his chair by what felt like 3 times normal gravity. Impossible. Humans do not possess this technology. Technology? Maya laughed, a sound like distant thunder. General, you misunderstand completely. This is not technology. This is just me being mildly annoyed. The holographic displays around the chamber shifted, no longer showing the damaged facilities, but instead displaying live feeds from various corporate installations across the galaxy. Mining operations, processing plants, waste disposal facilities, all locations where humans and other so-called primitive species labored under dangerous conditions. Let me tell you about the first incident, Maya continued, her gaze fixed on the Meridian Industries representative. The Kepler 442 mining operation. 37 human families lived on that asteroid, working 16-hour shifts extracting rare minerals. When the children started developing respiratory problems from the toxic dust, their parents requested better filtration systems. The display zoomed in on one particular facility, showing the perfect spherical void where it had once existed. The request was denied. Cost prohibitive, they were told. So I removed the facility. Removed. The Crystalline Collective's representative chimed nervously. The mass readings show. I compressed it, Maya said simply. Folded the space it occupied until it became a point smaller than an atom. The people were relocated safely first, of course. I am not cruel. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices as delegates spoke simultaneously, their translator units struggling to keep up. The Zephyrian representative's gas-based communication system released clouds of alarmed pheromones that triggered automatic air filtration systems. Ambassador Chen finally spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos. Maya represents a small percentage of the human population. We call them shapers. They can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level through focused consciousness. Shapers? General Korak spat, though he remained pinned to his chair. Ridiculous. No species can alter physics through thought alone. Maya turned her attention to him, and the gravity pressing down on the general intensified until his chair began to crack under the pressure. Physics is just a description of what happens, General. It is not a law that cannot be changed. When you truly understand the universe, you realize that consciousness and matter are the same thing expressed differently. She gestured toward the displays, which now showed industrial accidents occurring in real time across multiple systems. Shipyards twisted into impossible shapes, their metal structures flowing like liquid. Processing plants compressed into geometric forms that hurt to look at directly. Waste disposal facilities simply winked out of existence, leaving behind perfectly clean environments. Each of these facilities received multiple warnings, Maya explained. Safety violations, worker mistreatment, environmental damage to inhabited worlds. All ignored because the local populations were considered expendable. The Meridian representative finally found his voice. You cannot simply destroy private property. There are laws, regulations, proper procedures for disputes. Maya's expression remained serene, but the temperature in the chamber dropped another 10 degrees. Frost began forming on the metal surfaces despite the environmental controls working at maximum capacity. Your laws apply to people you consider civilized. We Deathworlders are apparently not included in that category. This is an act of war, shouted the hegemony's military advisor. The Council will not tolerate war? Maya interrupted gently. General, you have never experienced war. You have experienced conquest, exploitation, the systematic oppression of species you consider inferior, but war requires two sides with comparable capabilities. She stood slowly, and as she did, the artificial gravity in the chamber began fluctuating wildly. Delegates found themselves floating momentarily before being pressed back down. The station's hull groaned audibly as if under tremendous stress. I want to show you something, Maya said, walking around the table with measured steps. With each footfall, ripples seemed to spread through the air itself, distorting light and sound. This is what actual power looks like. The chamber's transparent walls suddenly became windows into space itself, showing the vast cosmic web of galaxies and dark matter that comprised the universe. But the view was wrong. Stars moved in accelerated time, galaxies spun like pinwheels, and nebulae flowed like rivers of liquid light. You see, Maya explained, her voice now echoing from impossible directions. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. We developed not just physical resilience, but mental adaptability that you cannot comprehend. Some of us learned to survive by becoming one with the hostile forces around us. She paused beside the crystalline representative, whose form was now resonating with harmonic frequencies that created visible light patterns. Your species developed beautiful mathematical precision because your world was stable and predictable. Very admirable. Moving to the Zephyrian delegate, she continued, your people mastered chemical communication because your atmosphere allowed complex molecular interactions. Fascinating adaptation. Finally, she stopped beside General Korax, who was now sweating profusely as the gravity around him continued to fluctuate. And your species became warriors because your high-gravity world made strength necessary for survival. All perfectly logical evolutionary responses. The view outside shifted again, showing Earth in the distance, a blue-green marble that looked deceptively peaceful. But our world taught us something different. It taught us that the universe itself is hostile, that reality can change without warning, that survival requires the ability to reshape the very foundations of existence. Maya returned to her seat, and gradually the environmental systems began stabilizing. The impossible view of accelerated space faded back to the normal starfield surrounding the station. But the message had been delivered with perfect clarity. So here is what will happen, she said, her voice returning to its original quiet tone. The exploitation stops. The dangerous working conditions end. The designation of certain species as expendable is revoked. And compensation will be provided to those who have suffered under the current system. Coordinator Thrix's voice shook slightly. And if we refuse? Maya smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both gentle and terrifying. Then I will demonstrate what happens when a Deathworlder stops being patient. The emergency session had been suspended for 3 hours while delegates contacted their respective governments. Maya sat quietly in the station's observation deck, watching ships arrive and depart through the transparent aluminum windows. Her mere presence had triggered the largest diplomatic crisis in galactic history, yet she appeared as calm as if she were watching clouds pass on a peaceful afternoon. Ambassador Chen found her there, holding 2 cups of what humans called coffee, a stimulant beverage that most other species considered mildly toxic. He offered one to Maya, who accepted it with a grateful smile that made her look like any normal teenager. The Hegemony Council is meeting in emergency session, Chen reported, settling into the chair beside her. Half want to declare humanity a galactic threat. The other half want to offer us full membership in the council immediately. Maya sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Fear makes people do interesting things. They cannot decide if they want to destroy us or join us. The corporate representatives are demanding military protection for their remaining facilities, Chen continued. They claim you have made terrorist threats, have I? Maya asked innocently. I simply explained the consequences of continuing their current policies. If they choose to interpret accurate information as threats, that seems like a personal problem. Through the observation windows, they could see additional security vessels taking positions around the station. Sleek warships from a dozen different species formed a defensive perimeter, their weapons trained outward as if expecting an invasion fleet rather than dealing with a single human girl. Maya, Chen said carefully, the things you showed them in there, moving galaxies, accelerating time, how much of that was real? She turned to look at him, and for a moment her eyes held that same cosmic depth he had witnessed in the conference chamber. All of it, Ambassador, and none of it. Reality is far more flexible than most people realize. Before Chen could ask for clarification, Coordinator Thrix approached their table. The session moderator looked as if he had aged several years in the past few hours, his normally pristine diplomatic robes wrinkled and stained with nervous perspiration. Ms. Maya, he began formally, the Council has requested that you demonstrate your capabilities under controlled conditions. Several governments refuse to believe that any individual could possess such power. Maya set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. They want proof, very well. What did you have in mind? Thrix gestured toward the central viewing area, where a large holographic projector had been installed. We have prepared a series of standard physics tests: simple matter manipulation, energy redirection, basic spatial distortion, nothing that would cause permanent damage. How thoughtful, Maya replied, standing and smoothing down her maintenance jumpsuit. Shall we begin with something simple? As they walked toward the testing area, delegates from the suspended session began filtering back into the observation deck. Word had spread throughout the station that the human girl was going to provide a demonstration, and beings who had never shown interest in human capabilities now watched with intense fascination. The testing area contained several standard objects: a meter-long duralloy bar, a container of inert gas, and a small gravity generator typically used for cargo handling. Sensors surrounding the space would record any energy emissions or spatial distortions. Let us start with basic matter manipulation, announced the crystalline representative, who had apparently been elected to oversee the demonstration. Please alter the molecular structure of the duralloy bar. Maya approached the bar and placed her hand on its surface. For several seconds, nothing happened. The sensors showed no energy readings, no particle emissions, no gravitational fluctuations. Some delegates began murmuring that perhaps the earlier display had been an elaborate hoax. Then the bar began to change. The transformation started at the point where Maya's palm contacted the metal. The rigid duralloy became fluid, flowing like liquid mercury while maintaining its basic shape. Colors rippled across its surface, deep blues and purples that had no business existing in metallic structures. The bar stretched, compressed, twisted into complex geometric forms that should have been impossible, given the constraints of three-dimensional space. Molecular structure is a suggestion rather than a law, Maya explained conversationally as the bar continued its metamorphosis. When you understand that matter is simply energy expressing itself in specific patterns, changing those patterns becomes quite straightforward. The duralloy had now formed itself into what appeared to be a miniature galaxy, complete with spiral arms that rotated slowly around a central core. Stars twinkled within the metallic structure, and careful observation revealed that the entire formation was actually moving through 4 dimensions simultaneously. Impossible, breathed the Zephyrian delegate. Our sensors show no energy input, no external forces acting on the material. That is because you are looking for the wrong things, Maya replied, removing her hand from the transformed bar, which continued its cosmic dance unsupported. You assume that change requires external energy because that is how your technology works. But consciousness is not technology. General Korax, who had been notably quiet since the chamber incident, stepped forward aggressively. Parlor tricks and illusions. Show us something that matters. Affect something at a distance without physical contact. Maya nodded agreeably and turned her attention to the gravity generator on the far side of the testing area. The device was a standard commercial unit, capable of producing artificial gravity fields up to twice normal strength within a limited radius. That generator creates gravity by manipulating space-time curvature through controlled mass displacement, Maya said, though she made no move toward the device. A clever mechanical solution to a fundamental force. But mechanical solutions are so limiting. She closed her eyes and tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. The gravity generator began to glow, its status lights flickering between normal green and emergency red. The gravitational field it produced started fluctuating wildly, causing loose objects throughout the observation deck to float and drift in impossible directions. Basic gravity manipulation, Maya murmured. Hardly worth mentioning, but as she spoke, the effects intensified dramatically. The artificial gravity throughout the entire station began responding to her unconscious commands. Delegates found themselves experiencing varying gravitational orientations, some standing normally while others were pulled toward walls or ceilings. The station's hull groaned under stresses that should have torn it apart, yet somehow maintained structural integrity. Stop, Coordinator Thrix called out as several delegates began floating helplessly through the air. This is too dangerous! Maya opened her eyes and immediately all gravitational effects returned to normal. Delegates settled back into their proper orientations, though many remained shaken by the experience. Dangerous? Maya asked mildly. I was being extraordinarily careful. If I had actually been trying to cause damage, this station would no longer exist. The Meridian Industries representative, who had been conspicuously silent during the demonstration, finally spoke up. Even if we accept that you possess these abilities, you are only one individual. The galactic economy cannot be restructured based on the demands of a single person. Maya turned to face him, and her expression grew cold. You still do not understand. I am not making demands as an individual. I am delivering an ultimatum on behalf of every exploited population in the galaxy. She gestured toward the observation windows, where the starfield had begun to shift. Ships that had been stationary now appeared to be moving. Though their engines showed no activity, the stars themselves seemed to be rearranging into new patterns. There are 17 other shapers currently active among the human population, Maya continued. Each of us monitors different sectors of space. We have been watching, recording, documenting every instance of abuse and exploitation, and our patience has finally run out. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. If this one human could casually manipulate matter and energy at will, the existence of 17 more meant that the entire galactic power structure had become obsolete overnight. What do you want? Whispered Coordinator Thrix. Maya's smile returned, but it carried no warmth. I want to show you what happens when Deathworlders decide to reshape civilization. The communication array aboard Harmony's Edge had been working overtime for the past 6 hours. Messages flooded in from across the galaxy as news of the demonstration spread through official and unofficial channels. Emergency sessions convened on a dozen worlds while military commanders quietly calculated the futility of conventional weapons against enemies who could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. Maya had returned to the observation deck, where she sat cross-legged on the floor in a meditative pose. Around her, the air shimmered with barely visible energy patterns that made nearby electronic devices function erratically. She appeared to be in some form of trance, though her eyes remained open and tracked the movement of ships outside the station. Ambassador Chen approached cautiously, having learned to read the signs of Maya's deeper states of consciousness. When she was like this, she was not just aware of her immediate surroundings, but somehow connected to a vast network of information that spanned interstellar distances. They are gathering, Maya said without looking at him. Military fleets from 7 different species. The hegemony believes that sufficient firepower can solve any problem. Can it? Chen asked quietly. If they decide to attack Earth directly. Maya's laugh was like starlight crystallizing into sound. Attack Earth? Ambassador, they cannot even comprehend what Earth truly is. She gestured toward the viewport where her homeworld remained a distant blue dot. They see a single planet inhabited by primitives. What they do not understand is that Earth is not just our birth world. It is our teacher, our testing ground, our forge. As if responding to her words, the space around Earth began to change. What had appeared to be empty void now revealed massive structures hidden from conventional sensors. Orbital platforms that dwarfed the largest space stations materialized like ghosts becoming solid. Defensive installations that had been camouflaged as asteroids powered up, their energy signatures blazing to life across every spectrum of detection. The human home system has been prepared for contact with galactic civilization for over a century, Maya explained. We knew this day would come eventually. We simply chose to let you underestimate us until the proper moment arrived. The assembled delegates, who had been monitoring the situation from the conference chamber, now rushed to the observation windows in growing alarm. The defensive grid surrounding Earth was unlike anything in their combined military databases. The technology appeared to be generations ahead of current galactic standards, utilizing principles that their scientists insisted were impossible. General Korax arrived with several military advisors, all carrying portable communication devices that crackled with urgent reports from fleet commanders. Our sensors cannot penetrate whatever cloaking technology they are using, he announced grimly. Energy readings suggest weapons capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Weapons? Maya turned to look at him with genuine confusion. General, those are not weapons. Those are terraforming platforms, deep space habitats, research stations, and educational facilities. We have been quietly building infrastructure throughout this system for generations. She stood and approached the main viewing screen, which now displayed a detailed tactical analysis of the Sol system. Every planet and major moon showed signs of extensive human development, though most of it had been completely invisible until moments ago. Mars has a population of 12 million, Maya continued, pointing to various installations. Venus has cloud cities housing another 8 million. The asteroid belt contains mining operations and manufacturing facilities that produce more processed materials than the rest of the galaxy combined, and all of it has been powered by technologies you have repeatedly declared impossible. Coordinator Thrick struggled to process the implications. But your delegation status. You requested observer membership in the Galactic Council as a developing species. A convenient fiction, Ambassador Chen admitted. It allowed us to study galactic civilization, learn your languages, understand your political structures, and identify the systematic abuses that needed to be addressed. The communication systems throughout the station suddenly activated simultaneously, displaying incoming transmissions from across human space. The screen filled with faces, humans in environmental suits working in impossible conditions, humans in laboratories conducting research that pushed the boundaries of physics, humans in deep space installations that existed in regions where no ships should have been able to survive. We are not a single planet of primitives, Maya announced to the stunned assembly. We are a distributed civilization that has already colonized 47 star systems, using methods your science considers fantasy. We have adapted to environments that would kill your hardiest warriors within minutes, and we have been watching you. One transmission showed human settlements on the surface of neutron stars, where gravity was so intense that matter itself behaved differently. Another displayed research stations positioned inside the event horizons of black holes, somehow maintaining communication across impossible distances. A third revealed human explorers moving freely through the vacuum of intergalactic space without any visible life support equipment. How? Whispered the crystalline representative. The physics alone should make such adaptations impossible. Maya's expression grew serious. That is exactly the problem with your civilization. You assume that current understanding represents ultimate truth. You build technologies that work within known parameters and then declare anything beyond those parameters impossible. She gestured, and the air in the chamber began to take on the appearance of liquid starlight, flowing in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Consciousness is not separate from the universe, it is the universe becoming aware of itself. When you truly understand this principle, the distinction between thought and matter becomes meaningless. The demonstration was interrupted by urgent alarms throughout the station. Fleet Admiral Kethvar of the Combined Military Forces appeared on the main communication screen, his expression grim. "Coordinator Thrix, we have a significant problem. Our fleets are reporting complete weapon system failures. All energy weapons have stopped functioning and kinetic weapons are being deflected by unknown forces." Maya nodded approvingly. "My colleagues have established protective fields around the more aggressive fleet elements. We prefer not to have weapons pointed at us during diplomatic discussions." "Colleagues?" General Korax demanded. "The other Shapers," Maya replied. "They have been monitoring this situation and decided that additional military presence was unnecessary. Currently, 17 human Shapers are maintaining consciousness fields that extend across several star systems. Your weapons exist only because we permit them to exist." The magnitude of the revelation struck the delegates like a physical blow. Not only were humans far more advanced than anyone had suspected, but a small group of individuals among them possessed the power to neutralize the military forces of the entire galaxy, simply by deciding that weapons should not function. "What do you want from us?" Coordinator Thrix asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya returned to her cross-legged position on the floor, settling into another meditative pose. "We want you to grow up," she said simply. "Your civilizations have reached a level of technological sophistication that allows interstellar travel and large-scale resource manipulation. But you have retained the tribal mentalities of primitives who see other groups as competitors for limited resources." The air around her began to glow softly as she accessed deeper levels of consciousness. "The universe is vast beyond your comprehension. There are resources enough for every species to achieve prosperity without exploiting others. There are worlds enough for every population to find suitable homes without displacing existing inhabitants. There is knowledge enough for every civilization to advance without stealing discoveries from others." Her voice took on harmonics that seemed to resonate through the station's hull itself. "But first you must abandon the assumption that might makes right. You must accept that different evolutionary paths lead to different, but equally valid ways of existing, and you must understand that consciousness, not technology, represents the true measure of advancement." The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of environmental systems. Outside the viewports, the human installations around Earth pulsed with gentle light, like a heartbeat made visible across interplanetary distances. "We are offering you a choice," Maya concluded. "Join us in building a truly cooperative galactic civilization, or continue your current path and discover what happens when Deathworlders lose patience entirely." The response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours of Maya's ultimatum, emergency broadcasts flooded the galactic communication networks. 3 major corporate conglomerates announced immediate suspension of all operations in disputed territories. The Hegemony Council voted to establish a special commission for investigating labor practices across member species. Even the notoriously stubborn Krillian Empire issued statements calling for diplomatic solutions to interspecies conflicts. But not everyone was ready to surrender their advantages without a fight. Maya sensed the approaching threat long before the station's sensors detected anything unusual. She opened her eyes from meditation and tilted her head, listening to frequencies that existed beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. "We have visitors," she announced to Ambassador Chen, who had been reviewing diplomatic proposals on his datapad. "More delegates?" Chen asked, though he recognized the tone in Maya's voice that usually preceded significant complications. "The Void Hunters," Maya replied, standing and moving to the viewport. "They have been monitoring our conversation from the edge of the system. Apparently, they believe that eliminating the human Shapers would restore the previous balance of power." As if summoned by her words, the space around Harmony's edge began to distort. Ships materialized out of what had appeared to be empty vacuum, sleek predatory vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Void Hunters were one of the galaxy's most feared mercenary organizations, employing advanced stealth technology and exotic weapons that operated on principles most civilizations barely understood. Emergency alarms shrieked throughout the station as the defensive systems attempted to lock onto targets that barely registered on sensors. The assembled delegates rushed to observation windows, their various expressions of alarm creating a symphony of concerned clicks, hisses, and harmonic resonances. 27 vessels, reported the station's security chief over the communication system. Configuration unknown, but energy readings suggest heavy assault capabilities. They are requesting immediate surrender of the human delegation. Maya laughed, a sound like cosmic wind chimes dancing in solar storms. How delightfully direct. I appreciate honesty in one's intentions. General Korax activated his personal communicator, attempting to contact the combined fleet elements still positioned throughout the system. All units respond to hostile incursion at station coordinates. His transmission cut off mid-sentence as his device simply stopped functioning. I have temporarily suspended communication abilities for military units, Maya explained apologetically. We do not need additional complications while dealing with our unexpected guests. The lead Void Hunter vessel moved closer to the station, its hull shimmering with energy patterns that made it difficult to focus on directly. A transmission burst through the station's communication array, the voice that emerged carrying undertones that suggested artificial enhancement, or perhaps an entirely non-biological speaker. Human designation, Maya. You will surrender yourself and your associates immediately. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of this facility and all occupants. Maya approached the communication console and activated the response channel. When she spoke, her voice carried across multiple frequencies simultaneously, creating harmonics that made nearby equipment resonate sympathetically. Unknown vessel, you are trespassing in a diplomatic zone during active negotiations. State your purpose and authorization. Authorization is unnecessary. The Galactic Corporate Council has issued a priority contract for the elimination of threats to established order. You represent such a threat. The implications struck the assembled delegates immediately. Someone had hired the most dangerous mercenary organization in known space to assassinate the human shapers. The fact that such a contract could be issued without official government approval suggested that certain corporate interests were willing to risk everything to maintain their exploitative practices. Interesting, Maya mused, her tone suggesting genuine curiosity rather than concern. And you believe you can simply eliminate us through conventional warfare? Our weapon systems are specifically designed to counter unconventional defensive measures. Surrender now and the deaths of others will be unnecessary. Maya turned to address the delegates who had gathered in the observation area. I believe this presents an excellent opportunity for a more practical demonstration of human capabilities. Would anyone object to a brief educational display? Before anyone could respond, the Void Hunter vessels opened fire. The weapons they employed were unlike anything in standard galactic arsenals. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, they launched what appeared to be tears in space itself, dark ribbons that moved through normal matter as if it did not exist. The station's shields, designed to deflect conventional attacks, offered no resistance as the exotic weapons passed through them harmlessly and continued toward their targets. Maya stood calmly in the path of one approaching spatial distortion, making no attempt to seek cover or activate defensive systems. The dark ribbon reached her position and simply stopped. It hung in the air like a frozen lightning bolt, its destructive energy contained within an invisible framework that rendered it completely harmless. Interesting technology, Maya observed, reaching out to touch the suspended weapon discharge. Where her fingers made contact, the spatial distortion began to unravel, its exotic energy signature dissolving into harmless light. They are using controlled dimensional fractures to bypass conventional defenses. Quite clever. She gestured casually, and the remaining weapon discharges throughout the station similarly froze in mid-flight before dissolving into shimmering displays of aurora-like colors. The deadly assault had been neutralized as easily as one might brush away bothersome insects. Now then, Maya said, activating the communication channel again. Shall we discuss terms for your immediate departure? The response came not in words but in action. The Void Hunter vessels launched a coordinated barrage that should have overwhelmed any defensive capabilities. Hundreds of spatial distortions filled the space around the station, approaching from every possible angle in a pattern designed to prevent evasion or selective defense. Maya sighed softly and closed her eyes. When she reopened them, they held the depth of intergalactic void studded with newborn stars. The attacking weapons simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not deflected, but edited out of reality as if they had never been fired. The Void Hunter vessels found themselves drifting in space with their weapon systems displaying impossible readings. Energy reserves depleted, ammunition vanished, targeting computers reporting errors that their programmers had never anticipated. Your technology assumes that space and time follow consistent rules, Maya explained, her voice now reaching the attacking vessels directly, despite the lack of open communication channels. But those rules are more like suggestions when you understand the underlying principles. One by one, the Void Hunter ships began to change. Their aggressive angular designs softened into flowing curves. Their light-absorbing hulls became reflective, then transparent, then began glowing with soft internal illumination. Weapon systems reconfigured themselves into scientific instruments. Shield generators became atmospheric processors. The most feared warships in the galaxy were transformed into exploration vessels designed for peaceful research. "I have made some improvements to your vessels," Maya announced cheerfully. "You will find them much more suitable for constructive purposes. Your crews are unharmed, though they may experience some confusion as their aggressive neural conditioning has been replaced with curiosity and empathy." Station's communication array crackled with confused transmissions from the converted vessels. Void Hunter crew members, notorious for their ruthless efficiency, were now enthusiastically discussing the scientific possibilities of their transformed ships and expressing interest in collaborative research projects. "How?" whispered Coordinator Thrix. "Void Hunter conditioning is supposed to be irreversible," Maya shrugged, returning to her normal seated position. "Consciousness is infinitely malleable when approached correctly. Their conditioning was simply an imposed pattern of thought. I replaced it with a more constructive pattern." She turned to address the broader assembly of delegates. "This is what I meant when I spoke of Deathworlder capabilities. We do not simply develop better weapons or stronger defenses. We learn to reshape reality itself at the level of fundamental principles." The transformed Void Hunter vessels were now broadcasting requests for permission to conduct peaceful surveys of the system, their crews apparently having no memory of their previous hostile intentions. The most dangerous military force in the galaxy had been converted to scientific research in a matter of minutes. "The question remains," Maya said, settling back into meditation posture, "whether the rest of galactic civilization is ready to embrace a similar transformation." The transformation of the Void Hunter fleet created ripple effects that spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. News networks struggled to explain how the most feared mercenary organization in known space had suddenly announced their conversion to peaceful scientific research. Intelligence agencies found their files on Void Hunter capabilities suddenly outdated and useless. Military strategists realized that every assumption about defensive planning had become obsolete overnight. Maya remained in her meditative state for 3 full days, during which the space around Harmony's edge continued to exhibit strange phenomena. Ships approaching the station reported time dilation effects that made journeys shorter than expected. Communication signals traveled faster than light, without any apparent technological enhancement. Even the station's artificial gravity seemed more stable and comfortable than normal specifications should have allowed. When she finally opened her eyes, Maya found the observation deck filled with representatives from dozens of species that had not been present during the original negotiations. Word of the demonstrations had spread through both official and unofficial channels, drawing curious observers from across the galactic community. "I see we have attracted attention," Maya said to Ambassador Chen, who had been maintaining a careful vigil throughout her extended meditation. "The entire galaxy is watching," Chen confirmed. "Some are calling you the most dangerous individual in galactic history. Others are hailing you as the harbinger of a new evolutionary era. The philosophical implications alone have triggered academic conferences on 100 worlds." Maya stood and stretched, her movements causing subtle fluctuations in the local gravitational field that made nearby objects drift gently before settling back into place. "Philosophy is important, but practical implementation matters more. Have there been any concrete responses to our proposals?" Before Chen could answer, Coordinator Thrix approached with what appeared to be a massive data crystal containing thousands of individual messages. "The response has been overwhelming," he reported. 733 planetary governments have submitted formal requests for treaty negotiations. 412 corporate entities have offered voluntary compliance with revised labor standards, and 3 entire species have requested guidance on developing their own consciousness-based technologies. Maya accepted the data crystal and held it in her palm. As her fingers closed around it, The crystal began to glow with internal light. It stored information somehow becoming directly accessible to her consciousness without the need for any reading device. "Most of these are genuine," she said, after a moment of apparent consideration, "though several governments are clearly attempting to delay implementation while they develop countermeasures they believe might be effective against Shaper abilities." She handed the crystal back to Thrix, who noticed that it was now significantly smaller and no longer glowed. "I have compressed the redundant information and extracted the essential elements. You will find the review process much more manageable now." The crystalline representative approached hesitantly, his form resonating with harmonic frequencies that suggested extreme nervousness. "Ms. Maya, my people have been analyzing the mathematical principles underlying your demonstrations. Our calculations suggest that consciousness-based reality manipulation should create massive entropic imbalances that would destabilize local spacetime." Maya tilted her head thoughtfully, an understandable concern given your species' focus on mathematical precision. "But you are calculating based on the assumption that consciousness represents additional energy input to existing systems. Actually, consciousness is the organizing principle that was always present. We simply make it more efficient." To demonstrate, she gestured toward a decorative plant in the observation area. The plant began to grow visibly, its leaves expanding and new branches sprouting at an accelerated rate. But instead of consuming additional resources, the transformation seemed to optimize the plant's existing cellular structure, making it healthier and more vibrant while using less energy than before. "Consciousness does not add chaos to the universe," Maya explained as the plant continued its beneficial transformation. "It reduces entropy by introducing purposeful organization. The universe actually becomes more stable when consciousness guides natural processes rather than conflicting with them." A new voice interrupted the discussion, deep, resonant tones that suggested a massive speaker. The Titan representative, one of the galaxy's largest species, had finally arrived after days of travel through space-time that was normally too restrictive for their immense forms. "Human Maya," the Titan rumbled, each word creating vibrations that resonated through the station's hull. "My people have existed for millions of years, have seen civilizations rise and fall across cosmic time. Never have we witnessed abilities that operate on scales we ourselves cannot comprehend. Are you truly individual beings or manifestations of some collective consciousness?" Maya looked up at the towering figure, her neck craned back to meet eyes that were larger than her entire head. "We are individuals just as you are. But we learned something during our evolution that most species miss. The universe is not separate from consciousness. It is consciousness expressed in physical form." She raised her hand and the space between her palm and the Titan's massive form began to shimmer. "You experience existence from within time and space, believing yourselves to be contained by physical laws. We learn to experience existence from the perspective of the underlying consciousness that creates and maintains those laws." The shimmer between them intensified, and suddenly the enormous Titan appeared to be normal human size while Maya appeared equally massive. The effect lasted only a moment before both returned to their original proportions, but the implications were staggering. "Perspective is everything," Maya said simply. "Size, distance, time, even mass and energy. These are all perspective-dependent phenomena. When you can shift your perspective to that of the universe itself, you can adjust the relationships between all physical properties." The assembled delegates struggled to process the demonstration. If consciousness could literally redefine the relationships between fundamental physical properties, then every assumption about limitation and possibility needed to be reconsidered. General Corax, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the Void Hunter incident, finally spoke up. "Even if we accept these capabilities, implementation of your demands would require fundamental restructuring of galactic civilization. The economic disruption alone could cause the collapse of governments across hundreds of worlds." Maya's expression grew serious. "General, you are thinking in terms of scarcity and competition. Those concepts become meaningless when consciousness can reshape matter and energy at will." She gestured toward the viewport, where the space around Earth was beginning to display new activity. Massive structures were materializing in orbit, not built but grown from the quantum foam of empty space itself. They appeared to be some form of processing facilities, but their purpose was unlike anything in existing technology databases. Those installations are matter converters, Maya explained. They can transform any form of matter into any other form with perfect efficiency. Raw asteroids become finished goods. Toxic waste becomes useful materials. Even the vacuum of space can be converted into solid matter when consciousness provides the organizing framework. The economic implications hit the delegates like a tsunami. If humans could create unlimited quantities of any material simply by applying consciousness to energy patterns, then the entire concept of resource scarcity, which underpinned most galactic trade and territorial conflicts, would cease to exist. But surely there must be limits, protested the Meridian Industries representative. Conservation of energy, thermodynamic laws, are local approximations that apply when consciousness is not directly involved in organizing matter, Maya interrupted. When consciousness participates in the process, energy and matter become interchangeable aspects of a single underlying reality. She stood and moved to the center of the observation area, where her presence seemed to make the air itself more substantial, as if space were becoming denser around her. The universe contains infinite energy and infinite possibility. The only limitations are imposed by the beliefs and expectations of conscious observers. As she spoke, the station's environmental systems began operating more efficiently than their design specifications should have allowed. Power consumption dropped while environmental quality improved. Structural integrity increased despite the installation of no additional materials. Even the food replicators began producing meals that tasted better and provided more nutrition than standard molecular templates should have generated. This is what cooperation with consciousness looks like, Maya announced. Technology becomes more effective, resource consumption decreases, and quality of life improves across all measurable parameters. She turned to address the full assembly of delegates. We are not asking you to abandon your existing civilizations. We are offering to help you transform them into something better than you previously imagined possible. The silence that followed was filled with the weight of galactic history reaching a turning point. Eva. The demonstration began at dawn. Though dawn was an arbitrary concept aboard a space station, Maya had requested that all delegates gather in the primary observation chamber, where the transparent walls provided an unobstructed view of the space surrounding Earth. What they witnessed there would fundamentally alter their understanding of what was possible. Maya stood at the center of the chamber, her eyes closed in deep concentration. Around her, the other 17 human shapers had materialized, not through transportation but by shifting their consciousness from distant locations directly into the shared space of the station. Each appeared as a translucent figure overlaid with patterns of light that suggested vast intelligence and power. We have decided to create a gift for the galaxy, Maya announced, her voice somehow carrying the harmonies of all 18 shapers simultaneously. A world that demonstrates what becomes possible when consciousness guides matter from the quantum level upward. The space beyond Earth began to shimmer, and what had appeared to be empty void started to coalesce into something substantial. It was not construction in any conventional sense. No materials were transported, no energy was visibly expended. Instead, reality itself seemed to be reorganizing, shifting from one configuration to another through the application of focused will. They are creating matter from vacuum, whispered the crystalline representative, his mathematical mind struggling to process what the sensors were reporting. 0-point energy extraction on scales that should require stellar-level power sources. The formation accelerated, and within hours a new planet had taken shape in a stable orbit between Earth and Mars. But this was unlike any world in the galactic databases. Its surface showed impossible geography, floating continents that maintained position through localized gravity manipulation, crystalline formations that grew like living things, and atmospheric patterns that created permanent aurora displays across the entire sky. The planetary structure is self-organizing, explained one of the shaper overlays, an elderly woman whose consciousness radiated gentle wisdom. Matter has been programmed at the quantum level to maintain optimal conditions for any form of life that chooses to inhabit it. As the delegates watched in fascination, the new world began developing its own ecosystem. Oceans formed not through water accumulation but through direct matter conversion, their depths showing impossible clarity and richness. Forests appeared that seemed to be made of living crystal, their tree-like structures conducting light and energy in patterns that created a planet-wide neural network. Consciousness-based terraforming, Maya continued. The world adapts automatically to the needs of its inhabitants. A methane-breathing species would find appropriate atmospheric conditions in their region. Silicon-based life forms would discover suitable mineral matrices. Energy beings would encounter compatible electromagnetic environments. The most astounding feature became apparent as the planetary surface stabilized. Cities were growing from the ground itself. Not built structures, but organized matter that shaped itself into optimal configurations for habitation. Architecture flowed like liquid sculpture, creating spaces that were beautiful, functional, and perfectly adapted to the psychological needs of any species that might use them. Impossible, breathed General Korax. Planetary formation requires millions of years. Ecosystem development takes eons. You have created a mature biosphere in a matter of hours. Time is relative to consciousness, replied another Shaper Overlay, a young man whose presence suggested vast technical knowledge. When consciousness participates directly in matter organization, the usual temporal constraints become irrelevant. The new world pulsed with gentle light, its entire surface radiating harmonious energy that could be detected even at the distance of the observation station. Every sensor reading indicated optimal conditions for life, but life enhanced beyond normal parameters. The very matter of the planet appeared to be conscious, responsive to the needs and desires of any consciousness that interacted with it. We call it Haven, Maya announced, opening her eyes to reveal depths that now seemed to contain the swirling patterns of the newborn world itself. It will serve as a demonstration of what galactic civilization could become when consciousness and matter work in perfect cooperation. Coordinator Thrix struggled to find words adequate to the moment. The energy requirements alone should have consumed the output of multiple stars.
How is this possible?
Energy is infinite when consciousness provides the organizing principle, Maya replied. We are not creating energy. We are allowing the infinite potential that already exists to express itself in organized form. The implications hit the delegates in waves. If conscious beings could literally create worlds tailored to the needs of any species, then territorial conflicts, resource wars, and population pressure became obsolete concepts. The galaxy contained enough space and matter to provide unlimited worlds for unlimited populations, limited only by the availability of conscious beings capable of guiding the creation process. You are offering to teach this to other species? Asked the Titan representative, his massive voice filled with awe. We are offering to share consciousness development techniques with any species ready to abandon exploitation and embrace cooperation, Maya confirmed. But the transformation must be genuine. Consciousness-based abilities cannot be used for destructive purposes. They simply will not function when motivated by harmful intent. She gestured toward the new planet, where the first ships were already approaching to begin detailed surveys.
Haven will serve as a training ground where representatives from any species can learn to interact with consciousness-responsive matter.
Those who master the basic principles can return to guide similar transformations in their own regions of space. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the magnitude of what they were witnessing. In a single day, the humans had demonstrated the ability to create paradise worlds from empty space. If such abilities could be developed by other species, the galaxy could be transformed into something beyond the wildest dreams of utopian philosophers. But the transformation would require abandoning the competitive, exploitative mindset that had dominated galactic civilization for millennia. Species would need to learn to see other forms of consciousness as partners, rather than resources to be utilized. The choice is yours, Maya said, settling back into her meditative posture as the other Shaper overlays began to fade. Continue the old patterns of scarcity, competition, and exploitation, or join us in exploring what becomes possible when consciousness recognizes itself in all its manifestations. She closed her eyes again, but her voice continued to carry clearly throughout the chamber. We will wait. Time moves differently for consciousness than for matter. Whether you join us today or in 1,000 years makes no difference to us, but the offer remains open. The new world continued to pulse with gentle light, a beacon of possibility visible from across the solar system. Ships from dozens of species were already changing course to investigate this impossible creation, their crews filled with wonder and hope. In the observation chamber, Delegates from across the galaxy faced the most important decision in their species' histories. They could return to their worlds with reports of humanity's impossible abilities and attempt to develop countermeasures, continuing the old patterns of fear and competition. Or they could take the first steps toward a transformation that would render such patterns obsolete. The Deathworlder girl sat in perfect stillness, patient as only beings who had transcended normal limitations of time and space could be patient. Around her, the representatives of Galactic civilization wrestled with the choice between the familiar darkness of scarcity and the unknown brightness of abundance. The universe waited to see which path consciousness would choose for its next great adventure. As the hours passed and Delegate stepped forward to request detailed information about consciousness development programs. It became clear that the age of exploitation was ending. In its place, something unprecedented was beginning. A civilization based not on the domination of matter by consciousness, but on their willing cooperation in the endless exploration of possibility. The Deathworlder girl smiled without opening her eyes, sensing the shift in galactic consciousness as surely as she could sense the quantum fluctuations that held matter together. The silence that had lasted 13 seconds in a diplomatic chamber had indeed broken it open to reveal the infinite potential that had always been waiting beneath the surface of the known universe.